This story is titled "I Left My Husband for My Lover. Now my best friend married him, and I regret everything." Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, it's free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey guys, I've been lurking on this subreddit for a while, reading other people's stories, never thinking I'd be the one posting here. But here I am, putting my mess of a life out there. I don't know if I'm looking for advice, judgment, or just a chance to lay it all out and face what I've done. Either way, here goes. A few years ago, I, 34, female, had what most people would consider a pretty perfect life. I was married to Lucas. He wasn't just a good husband. He was the husband. The kind of guy that makes people go, "Wow, you're so lucky." And I really was. Even my best friend since college, Ashley, 30, female, used to remind me how lucky I was to have him. She'd say, "Men like Lucas don't come around often, you know?" He was patient, hardworking, and the best dad to our daughter, Lily. He'd come home after long hours at his IT job and still have the energy to read Lily a bedtime story or help her build a blanket fort in the living room. He even did the voices when he read her books, and she loved that. I was married to Lucas. He was the kind of man people dream about. A loving husband, an amazing father to our daughter Lily, and one of the most selfless people I've ever known. He worked hard but still made time for us, whether it was helping with Lily's homework, cooking dinner, or even planning little family outings. Life with him was stable, comforting, and honestly perfect. But I guess perfect wasn't enough for me. I don't know when it started, but at some point, I began feeling restless, bored. Maybe, I hate admitting it, but I started taking Lucas for granted. He was so dependable, so predictable, and I convinced myself that I needed more excitement in my life. It's ridiculous when I think about it now because that predictability was actually security and love. But at the time, I was too blind to see it. Around that time, I started venting to Ashley. I'd tell her I felt stuck, like every day was the same. "I know Lucas is great," I'd say, "but sometimes it feels like I'm just going through the motions." Ashley always tried to talk me down. "That's what happens in marriage," she'd tell me. "You're not dating anymore, but it's about building something solid." I nodded along, but her words didn't stick. I guess I didn't want them to. That's when Dylan came into the picture. Dylan worked at this little cafe near my office. I used to go there during lunch breaks, and at first he was just the friendly guy who made my coffee. He had this charisma about him, loud, confident, full of crazy stories. People seemed to love him, and he always had a crowd around him. Compared to Lucas, Dylan was different. Lucas was calm, steady, and not one for the spotlight. Dylan, on the other hand, was bold, always the center of attention, and I was drawn to that energy. At first, it was just casual conversations when I grabbed my coffee. Then it turned into inside jokes. One time, as I was laughing at some ridiculous story he was telling about a customer trying to pay with Monopoly money, he leaned in just slightly, grinning, and said, "You've got a great laugh, you know that?" His smooth way of grabbing attention, the way he knew how to play with words, made my stomach flip in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was like a rush of butterflies, and for a second, I forgot I was married. Before I knew it, I was going there every lunch break. Not just for the coffee, but to see him. I told myself it was harmless, just a little fun during my otherwise boring life. But looking back, I know I was lying to myself. The truth is, I liked the way Dylan made me feel, noticed, special, and even a little rebellious. Lucas didn't make me feel like that anymore. But to be fair, he didn't need to. He was busy working hard and keeping our family afloat while I was busy chasing a stupid thrill. Things escalated faster than I expected. Dylan started texting me outside of work, just funny memes or comments about my day. It seemed innocent at first, but the texts got more flirty over time, and I didn't stop it. If anything, I encouraged it. It felt exciting, like I was living some kind of double life. I know how awful that sounds. Trust me, I hate myself for it now. I mentioned Dylan to Ashley once casually, Just some funny story he told me at the cafe. He sounds like trouble, she said with a half smile. But entertaining trouble. At the time, it felt harmless, so I didn't think much of it. I didn't tell her how often I was going to the cafe or that I looked forward to seeing him. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. One day, Dylan asked me to grab lunch with him outside of the cafe. I knew it was crossing a line, but I agreed anyway. He was ridiculous and over the top, but in the moment it felt like an escape from my boring life with Lucas. After that lunch, things started snowballing. We'd meet up for lunch more often, and I'd find myself smiling at my phone whenever his texts came through. I don't know when exactly it became physical, but I do know it was entirely my fault. Dylan didn't pressure me. If anything, I was the one who made the first move. I remember feeling so giddy and alive, like I was breaking all the rules I thought were holding me back. The guilt was there for sure. I'd see Lucas at home, helping Lily with her math homework or folding laundry without a single complaint, and I'd feel like the worst person in the world. But the more I met with Dylan, the more I felt that I was betraying him, my own husband. I convinced myself that I deserved to feel happy, that I deserved that freedom. One night, everything came crashing down. I told Lucas I had to work late, which wasn't uncommon for me. He didn't question it because he trusted me completely. That night, I went to Dylan's place. It was a small, messy studio apartment that smelled like stale coffee and cheap cologne. It wasn't glamorous, but at the time, it felt exciting. When I got home, Lucas was waiting for me. He was sitting on the couch, holding my work bag. My stomach dropped because I knew I'd left it at home in my rush to meet Dylan. I tried to act normal, saying I was tired and needed to shower, but Lucas wasn't buying it. "Did you forget something?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. He dumped the contents of my bag onto the floor, and there it was, a receipt from the cafe, time-stamped for earlier that night. My heart started racing as I scrambled for an excuse, but I couldn't come up with anything. "Who is he?" Lucas asked, his tone eerily steady. He wasn't yelling or accusing. He just wanted the truth, and I couldn't give it to him. I just stood there, frozen, as the weight of my actions hit me like a truck. Lucas didn't press me for answers. He didn't yell or lose his temper. He just stood up, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I trust you." Then he went upstairs without another word. I remember standing there in the living room, feeling a mix of guilt, panic, and embarrassingly, relief. A small, selfish part of me thought, at least the secret's out now. But I couldn't even begin to process what I'd just done to my family. The days after Lucas confronted me were a blur. He didn't say much, and honestly, that was worse than yelling. He moved around the house like a ghost, doing his usual chores, helping Lily with her schoolwork, even taking care of things I had dropped the ball on. But he didn't speak to me unless it was absolutely necessary. I didn't know what to do. A part of me wanted to come clean, to apologize and beg him to forgive me. But another part of me thought I had finally freed myself from the predictable life I had grown so tired of. I convinced myself that this was my chance to start over, to find the happiness I thought I was missing. The real shift happened when Lucas sat me down one night after Lily was in bed. His voice was calm but detached, and I could tell he'd spent days thinking about what he was going to say. "I think it's best if we separate," he said, looking me straight in the eye. I didn't argue. I didn't cry or beg or even try to fix things. Instead, I nodded, as if I'd been waiting for him to say those words. He didn't ask about Dylan or press me for details. He just said he'd stay until we could figure out the logistics of splitting up. Here's the thing, I felt relieved. I hate admitting that now, but at the time, I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was letting Lucas go so he could find someone who would appreciate him, and I told myself I'd finally get the freedom I was craving. A few weeks later, we filed for divorce. Lucas didn't fight me on anything except custody of Lily. He wanted shared custody, but I pushed for full custody. I told the court I was her primary caregiver, that I had the flexibility to take care of her needs, and that she'd be better off staying with me full-time. Lucas didn't argue much. He just said, "If that's what's best for Lily, I'll respect it." At the time, I saw it as him giving up, as proof that he didn't care enough to fight for her. Now, I realize he was trying to keep things civil for Lily's sake. After the papers were signed and Lucas moved out, I thought I'd finally feel free. Dylan moved in with me a few weeks later, and at first it was exactly what I thought I wanted. We spent our days laughing, watching movies, and doing whatever we felt like. He made me feel young and carefree, like I was living the life I'd missed out on. Lily didn't seem to mind at first. She was too young to fully understand what was happening, and Dylan made an effort to be nice to her. He'd bring her little gifts or joke around with her during dinner. I told myself we were building a new kind of family, one that would be just as good as what I'd left behind. But things started to change pretty quickly. Dylan's carefree attitude, which I had once found so exciting, started to feel irresponsible. He struggled to hold down a job and always had an excuse for why it wasn't his fault. The manager was a jerk, or the hours didn't work for him. He'd bounce from one gig to the next, never staying anywhere longer than a month or two. First, I brushed it off. I told myself it wasn't a big deal because I had a stable job and we could manage on my income. But then the bills started piling up. Dylan's fun stories turned into constant complaints about how life was unfair, and his charm started to wear thin. Lily began to notice the tension. She'd ask questions like, "Why doesn't Dylan go to work?" Or "Why is he always tired?" I didn't know how to answer her without making excuses, so I avoided the topic altogether. The breaking point came when Dylan borrowed money from me to cover his car payment. He promised he'd pay me back as soon as he got his next paycheck, but that paycheck never came. Instead, he spent the money on a new gaming console to blow off steam. When I confronted him about it, he laughed it off and said, "You're stressing over nothing. We're fine." We weren't fine. I was draining my savings to cover the rent, groceries, and daycare. Meanwhile, Dylan was spending his days playing video games and complaining about how the world was against him. I started to resent him, but I didn't know how to fix it. I felt like I'd backed myself into a corner, and there was no way out. I couldn't go back to Lucas and admit I'd made a mistake, and I couldn't leave Dylan without turning my life into even more of a mess. One night, after a particularly stressful day at work, I came home to find Dylan passed out on the couch, surrounded by empty takeout containers. Lily was sitting on the floor, doing her homework by herself. "Where's Dylan?" I asked her. She looked up at me and said he was tired. Something in me snapped. I realized that this wasn't the life I wanted for Lily. I had taken her away from a stable, loving home and dragged her into chaos. And for what? A guy who couldn't even be bothered to help her with her homework. I wanted to call Lucas. I wanted to beg him to forgive me and take us back. But I couldn't. I was too ashamed, too scared to face the consequences of my actions. Instead, I buried my feelings and tried to make it work with Dylan. I told myself things would get better, that he just needed time to get back on his feet. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself again. The freedom I had wanted so badly had turned into a prison of my own making, and the worst part was, I had no one to blame but myself. I didn't know how to handle it. Lily was asking for her dad more and more, and every time she brought him up, it felt like someone was twisting a knife in my chest. She'd ask, "Why doesn't Daddy come over anymore? Or can I call him?" I never stopped her from calling him. But when she did, Lucas's voice would be so warm and steady, the complete opposite of the chaos I was trying to keep hidden. I could tell Lucas missed her, even though he never said anything directly. He didn't need to. He always made time to talk to Lily no matter what, and it made me feel worse every time I overheard their conversations. Meanwhile, Dylan wasn't stepping up the way I thought he would. When I pictured this new life, I thought he'd be this fun, engaged partner and a cool stepdad. Instead, he spent most of his time on the couch, scrolling through his phone or playing video games, leaving me to juggle work, bills, and Lily's needs. One night, everything came to a head. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted, only to find Dylan hadn't done anything all day. The sink was full of dirty dishes. Lily's homework was untouched, and Dylan was on the couch, surrounded by snack wrappers. I snapped, "Can you help me out for once? I can't do everything." He just shrugged, like I was overreacting. "You're the one who wanted all this. I didn't sign up to be some babysitter." That word hit me like a ton of bricks. Lily wasn't some random kid. She was my daughter. Our family wasn't supposed to feel like a chore to him. I ended up locking myself in the bathroom and crying because I didn't want Lily to see me like that. The next day, Lily asked me why Dylan never helped her with her schoolwork. She wasn't being mean about it, just curious. I didn't have an answer, so I changed the subject, but I couldn't shake the guilt that was building inside me. This wasn't what I'd promised her when I fought for custody. That night, after Lily went to bed, I decided to call Lucas. I hadn't spoken to him directly in months, not since the custody arrangement. He picked up on the third ring, and hearing his voice felt like a mix of relief and shame. "What's wrong?" he asked, skipping the small talk. He always had a way of knowing when something was off. "I can't do this anymore," I blurted out. "I made a mistake, Lucas. A huge mistake. I thought I wanted this life, but I didn't realize how good I had it with you. I need help. Lily needs you." There was a long pause, and I could hear him sigh on the other end of the line. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice calm but distant. I wasn't prepared for that question. I didn't know what I wanted. Maybe I thought he'd say he'd come running back, that he'd forgive me and we'd figure it out. Instead, he waited for me to explain, and when I couldn't, he finally said, "I'm always here for Lily, but I can't fix this for you. You made your choices." His words stung. I tried to explain, to tell him how sorry I was, but he cut me off. "You don't need to apologize to me. You need to figure out how to be the mom Lily deserves." The conversation ended shortly after that, and I sat there staring at my phone, feeling more lost than ever. Lucas hadn't yelled at me or called me names. He didn't even seem angry. He just sounded done. The next day, I tried to put on a brave face for Lily, but I was crumbling inside. I had lost the one person who had always been my safety net, and I knew I'd thrown it all away for someone who didn't even care about me or my daughter. Dylan, of course, had no idea about the phone call. He spent the evening complaining about how his job search was going nowhere and how the world was out to get him. A week later, I packed Lily into the car and drove 2 hours to Lucas's new place. I didn't call ahead because I knew he wouldn't agree to meet me if I did. When I knocked on the door, he looked surprised to see us. Lily ran to him and hugged him tightly, and I wanted to hug him too, but I couldn't. We sat down in his living room, and I poured my heart out. I told him about Dylan, the bills, the stress, and how I regretted everything. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need your help. I want to make things right for Lily's sake," I said, choking back tears. Lucas listened patiently, but his expression didn't change. When I finished, he shook his head. "I'm sorry you're struggling," he said, "but I can't be the solution to your problems. Lily is my priority, and she always will be. But you and I, that chapter is over." I begged him to reconsider, to let me prove I could change. I even suggested we try therapy, but he stayed firm. "You made your choice, and I've made mine. Lily needs stability, and that's not going to come from us pretending we can go back to what we had." I drove home that night feeling like I'd hit rock bottom. Dylan was asleep on the couch when I got back, completely oblivious to what had just happened. I looked at him and realized I couldn't stand the sight of him anymore. I had thrown away a gentleman, a stable life, for someone who didn't even care enough to pick up after himself. Now I feel confused and absolutely heartbroken. I need help. Someone to hold me and tell me it's going to be all right. I could only imagine Lucas doing this, because he was the shoulder I leaned on whenever I felt lost. But now he's not even answering my calls anymore. I don't know what to do. Should I try to convince Lucas to think about us again? Maybe he still has feelings for me, who knows? Tell me, guys, what you think, and I'll keep you updated. Update 1. Hey again, everyone. I didn't expect things would spiral out of control this badly. If anything, it's worse than I could have imagined. After that night with Lucas, when he basically shut the door on any chance of fixing things between us, I went home feeling completely shattered. I felt like I had no options left, no direction, and no way to claw my way back to something normal. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Dylan yelling at the TV. He was playing one of his online games, completely oblivious to the mess our life had become. I sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at the wreckage around me. The sink was full of dirty dishes, unopened bills were scattered across the counter, and piles of laundry were left forgotten in the corner. This was my life now. It felt suffocating, and I had no idea where to even start. Lily was still asleep, so I decided to try talking to Dylan again. I told him we needed to come up with a plan, that I couldn't keep carrying everything on my own. He barely glanced at me and muttered, trying, "Okay? Do you think I like being stuck like this?" His tone was defensive, dismissive, and it made me feel small. I wanted to argue, to demand that he step up, but I just didn't have the energy. I let it go because fighting with him felt pointless. But things didn't just stay bad, they got worse. Dylan became more withdrawn, more irritable, and completely unmotivated. He'd promised to look for a job, but instead, he'd spend hours glued to his games or scrolling through his phone. Meanwhile, I was working longer hours just to keep the lights on. Every day I came home more drained than the last, and every time I saw him lounging around like he didn't have a care in the world, I felt my resentment building. Then came the debt collectors. My credit cards were maxed out, and the calls became relentless. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach sank. Dylan didn't seem to care. "Just tell them you'll pay later," he said with a shrug. Like this was some casual inconvenience and not a full-blown crisis. I realized then just how clueless or in denial he was about the situation we were in. Night after night, arguments about money escalated. Dylan stormed out, and I didn't know where he went. Honestly, I didn't care. I sat in the silence, feeling completely trapped. I couldn't go back to Lucas. I couldn't keep living like this, and I couldn't pretend Dylan was going to magically change. When he finally came back hours later, something was off. He was jittery, his eyes darting around like he expected someone to burst through the door at any moment. At first, I thought he was drunk or high, but it was worse than that. He admitted he'd borrowed money from some shady people, a gang or loan sharks, I wasn't sure. And now he owed them a lot. When I pressed him for details, he waved me off. "It's fine. I'll handle it." But he didn't handle it. A few days later, they started showing up at the house. They'd bang on the door, shouting for Dylan to come out. Sometimes he wasn't even home, and I had to face them myself. It was terrifying. I started keeping the curtains closed and told Lily never to answer the door. My anxiety was through the roof, and every knock made my heart race. Then Dylan made everything worse. One night, after another fight about money, he pulled out a little baggie of pills. "You need to chill out. Try one," he said. I should have kicked him out right then and there. I should have told him to get out and never come back. But I was so stressed, so desperate for some kind of escape, that I didn't. I took the pill, just one. That one quickly turned into 2, then 3. Before I knew it, I was using it regularly. It became my way to cope, to numb the constant stress and shame. Dylan, of course, encouraged it. He acted like it was something we were doing together, like it was normal. I hated myself for it, but stopping felt impossible. Every time I tried to quit, the anxiety would come rushing back, and I'd cave. Lily noticed. She didn't say anything at first, but I could see it in her eyes. The worry, the confusion. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew something wasn't right. She started keeping her distance from me, spending more time in her room or asking to stay over at a friend's house. It broke my heart every time she looked at me like she didn't recognize the person I'd become. I kept telling myself I'd quit, that I'd clean up my act and get back on track. But the longer it went on, the harder it became. The stress, the guilt, the shame, it all felt insurmountable. And every time I tried to stop, I just ended up spiraling back. One night, after Lily went to bed, I picked up my phone and called Ashley. She'd been the one person I could always count on to listen, even when I was being a total mess. She'd been distant lately, but I figured she was just busy like she always got with work. I didn't think much of it when she picked up. I immediately started venting. I told her everything. How Dylan wasn't pulling his weight, how the debt collectors were getting more aggressive, how I was struggling to stop using. "I just don't know what to do anymore," I said, choking back tears. "I feel like I'm drowning. And Lily, she's noticing. I can't even look at her without feeling like the worst mom in the world." Ashley was quiet for a moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was measured, careful. "You need help. Real help, not just talking to me. Have you thought about rehab or therapy?" I brushed her off. "I don't have time for that. I just need things to calm down, and then I'll figure it out. I'm trying, Ash. I really am. There was a long pause, and then she said something that made my stomach drop. I can't keep this to myself anymore. I have to tell Lucas. My heart started racing. What? No, you can't. Ashley, please, I'm figuring it out. I don't need him swooping in and making everything worse. It's not about you, she snapped, her voice sharp. It's about Lily. She's a kid, and she's stuck in the middle of this mess. You told me yourself you're struggling to stop. What happens if things get worse? If she gets caught in the crossfire? I can't sit by and do nothing. I lost it. I yelled. I begged. I accused her of betraying me, but Ashley wouldn't budge. I love you, she said, her voice softening. But I love Lily too. And right now, she's the one who needs help. I'm sorry, but I can't ignore this. When the call ended, I sat on the couch shaking, my mind racing with what-ifs, with dread about what would happen when Lucas found out. I knew Ashley wouldn't lie or sugarcoat anything. She'd lay it all out. And Lucas wouldn't let it slide. I spent the next few days in a haze of panic, checking my phone obsessively, expecting a call or text from him. But there was, and still is, nothing. Just silence. The waiting is unbearable. I don't know if he's planning something, or if Ashley hasn't gone through with it yet. So here I am, posting here, hoping any of you could tell me what to do. I'm out of options, completely devastated, and scared. Update 2. Hi guys, here's the update, although I'm not really in the mood for it, but at least I'll get it out of my chest. The fallout hit hard. 2 days after my call with Ashley, Lucas showed up at the house. I didn't even hear his car pull up, just a sharp knock at the door that made my heart leap into my throat. When I opened it and saw him standing there, I froze. He looked calm, but it was the kind of calm that made you feel like the ground beneath you was about to give way. He didn't say anything at first, just looked past me into the house. I knew what he was seeing. The mess, the chaos, the life I'd let fall apart. Finally, he spoke. Where's Lily? I stammered something about her being in her room, but he didn't wait for me to finish. He stepped past me and went to find her. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest, but I didn't know what to say or do. When he came out of her room a few minutes later, Lily was holding a small bag of her things, looking confused and scared. Mom? She asked, her voice trembling. I tried to reassure her, to tell her everything was fine, but Lucas cut me off. She's coming with me, he said, his voice firm and unyielding. No, Lucas, please, I begged, stepping in front of him. You can't just take her from me. Let's talk about this. I'll fix things, I promise. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw just how angry and disappointed he was. You've had your chances. I'm not letting her stay here while you figure out how to pull yourself together. I pleaded with him, tears streaming down my face, but he wouldn't budge. He opened the door and walked out, Lily clutching his hand. She looked back at me, her eyes filled with confusion and fear, and it felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. After they left, I collapsed onto the floor. I tried calling Lucas, texting him, emailing him, anything to make him hear me out. I promised him I'd get help, that I'd do whatever it took to make things right. But he didn't respond. Not once. Now I'm sitting here in this empty house, surrounded by the mess I made, wondering if I'll ever be able to fix it. I've lost everything. My marriage, my stability, my daughter. And the worst part is, I know it's all my fault. Final update. Hi. It's been a hot minute since I last posted here. I got caught up in my messy life, and it's been a month since Lucas walked out with Lily. I haven't stopped thinking about that day. The silence in this house has been suffocating. I've spent hours staring at my phone, waiting for a response from Lucas. Just something to let me know how Lily is doing, or even to say he hates me. But nothing. It's like I've been erased from their lives, that I've been trying to keep it together. But every day feels harder than the last. I started therapy, which was Ashley's suggestion before all of this went down, but it feels like too little, too late. My therapist keeps saying I need to focus on rebuilding myself before I can rebuild anything else, but honestly, that feels impossible when the only thing I want is to have Lily back. A few days ago, I finally broke down and decided to reach out to Ashley again. I hadn't spoken to her since our argument, and I wasn't sure she'd even answer, but I needed to try. I called her, and to my surprise, she picked up after a couple of rings. "Hey," I said, my voice shaking. "I know I've been a mess lately, but I need to talk." She sighed on the other end of the line. "What do you want to talk about?" "Everything," I said. "I'm trying to get better. I've started therapy. I know I was awful to you, but I just need to know if you've heard anything from Lucas. Has he said anything about Lily?" There was a long pause, and I could hear her breathing, like she was trying to figure out how to respond. Finally, she said, "We need to talk in person. Can you come by?" I was surprised, relieved even. "Yeah, sure," I said quickly, already grabbing my keys. When I got to her apartment, she opened the door and gave me a small, hesitant smile. I could tell she wasn't thrilled to see me, but at least she was willing to let me in. We sat down, and I launched into everything I'd been holding in. The therapy, how I was trying to stay clean, how I missed Lily so much it physically hurt. Ashley listened quietly, her expression unreadable. When I finally stopped, she said, "I'm glad you're trying to get your life together, but there's something you need to know." My stomach tightened. "What?" She hesitated, then said, "Lucas and we've been talking a lot lately, about everything, about Lily, about you, and we're together now." I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. "What do you mean, together?" "I mean we're dating," she said. "It wasn't planned, and it didn't happen right away, but after everything came out, we reconnected. It just happened." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. My best friend, my only friend, was now with my ex-husband, the man I was still in love with. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice shaking. "How could you do this to me, Ashley? After everything I've been through." Her expression hardened. "This isn't about you. It's about Lucas and Lily. They need stability, and I can give them that. I'm not the one who ruined their lives, you did." Her words cut deep, but I couldn't argue with them. She was right. I was the one who had destroyed everything, and now she was swooping in to pick up the pieces. "I trusted you," I said weakly, tears streaming down my face. "I tried to help you." She shot back. "I gave you every chance to turn things around, and you didn't. Lucas deserves someone who can actually be there for him and Lily." I left her apartment feeling numb. I didn't even cry on the way home. I was too stunned. Once I got back to the house, though, it all hit me at once. I collapsed on the couch, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. Ashley had been my rock for years, and now she was with the man I had thrown away. A part of me wanted to lash out, to call Lucas and scream at him for moving on so quickly. But what would that accomplish? He didn't know me anything. I had no right to be angry or jealous, not after everything I'd done. Instead, I lashed out at Dylan. When I got home, he was sitting on the couch, as usual, surrounded by his usual mess of snack wrappers and empty cans. He didn't even look up when I came in. "That's it," I snapped. "This is all your fault," I yelled, slamming the door behind me. "You've done nothing but drag me down since the day I met you." Dylan looked up, startled at first, but then he smirked. Smirked like this was funny to him. "Oh, here we go," he said, leaning back and crossing his arms. "Blame me for your problems." Real mature. I didn't care anymore. "You are a loser, Dylan. You've done nothing but leech off me while I've tried to keep everything together. You think this is some kind of joke? My life is ruined because of you." He laughed in my face. A cruel, hollow laugh that made my blood boil. "Your life was already ruined before I even showed up. Don't pin your mess on me. You're the one who destroyed everything. You cheated on your husband. You let yourself spiral. Don't act like I'm the reason your kid got taken away." That hit harder than I wanted to admit. I stood there shaking with anger, but I didn't know how to respond, because deep down, I knew he wasn't entirely wrong. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling. "Get out of my house." Dylan stood up, towering over me, and for a second, I thought he might actually listen, but then he shrugged and said, "No, I think you're the one who's lucky I let you stick around." Before I could respond, he grabbed my bag from the counter, shoved a few of my things into it, and tossed it at me. Take your drama somewhere else, he said, smirking again. I don't have time for this. I wanted to scream, to fight, but I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. I grabbed the bag and left without another word. I didn't even take everything, just what I could carry. I felt like a ghost, floating out of the house I'd once thought would be my new beginning. I spent the next hour driving aimlessly, trying to figure out where to go. I couldn't go to Lucas, not after everything that had happened. I couldn't go back to Ashley, not that I'd want to. So I called an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in ages, embarrassed as hell, and begged her to let me crash on her couch. Now I'm crashing on that friend's couch, trying to figure out how to piece my life back together. She's kind, but I can tell she's uncomfortable having me here. I don't blame her. I wouldn't want me here either. I can't stop picturing Ashley and Lucas together, happy and stable, while I'm stuck in this mess of my own making. I wonder if Lily likes Ashley more than me now, if she sees her as the mom she wished I could have been. This morning, I finally worked up the courage to email Lucas. I didn't mention Ashley. I couldn't bring myself to. I just asked how Lily was doing and if there was any chance I could see her soon. I stared at my inbox for hours, refreshing it over and over, hoping for a response. When one finally came, my hands were shaking as I opened it. It was short, just a few lines. Lily is doing well. She's happy and adjusting to the changes. Right now, I think it's best to focus on yourself and getting better before we discuss visitation. I'll keep you updated. Take care. I read it over and over, trying to find some hidden meaning, some glimmer of hope. But it was clear, Lucas wasn't ready to let me back into their lives. And why would he be? He has Ashley now. He doesn't need me. I sit here in the emptiness I created, realizing the freedom I chased was nothing but a one-way ticket to losing everything that mattered. I had a life, a real one, and I threw it away for nothing.